Hello, it's Peggy Lee. Thanks for listening to Time Well Spent. Before we start the show, I'd like to invite you to listen to another OhitsBigRon Studios production, Talking Loud and Saying Nothing. Talking Loud and Saying Nothing is an advice podcast in which host, Mass Potential, and co-host Ronald talk about every topic under the sun, then attempt to answer advice questions from the listeners. While they're barely qualified to be handing out life advice to others, they have a great time discussing their opinion on politics, dating, black culture, pop culture, and everything in between. You'll have a great time listening to them and may even find yourself arguing your own point of view at your listening device. Check out Talking Loud and Saying Nothing wherever you get your podcasts. And now, without further ado, let's start the show.
A few years back, there was a popular app called Time Hop. To put it simply, the Time Hop app is the most rudimentary form of a time machine. The app allowed you to view your social media posts from the previous years on that same day. It became popular with people because it allowed us to critique our past selves and evaluate whether or not something we said in the past was pertinent to our present. People shared their time hops on their various social media platforms as a way to say, haha, I was right, or man, was I wrong about that. In preparing for this episode's release, I found myself looking through Facebook's version of Time Hop called On This Day, and I Columbused something that I had long forgotten about in my own past called Notes. The Notes application was Facebook's least ambitious attempt at adding blogging platform to its yet unrealized potential as a social media behemoth. I didn't realize how much I used the Notes application on Facebook until I started reading a couple of them, and I got so embarrassed from the thoughts that I was publicly posting. It was physically hard to read them without groaning out loud. After withstanding the pain of reading through my past, I was able to find something I wrote that I'm going to share with you. It's a thought I had back then that I think is still practically applicable today. The thought is, when you say goodbye to someone, you never see them again. Welcome to another exciting episode of Time Well Spent with Ronald, the podcast that nobody asked for, yet somebody is listening to. I'm Ronald. All right, on today's episode, I'm going to take you on a short trip through both time and space existentially as we review the contents of one of my earliest Facebook notes entitled Goodbye. I wrote this note back when even Facebook would have been considered an infant, and no one knew quite how to do anything on it besides exist yet. We'll get to the content in a minute, however, I wanted to provide you with some listening notes. Since a far younger Ronald wrote this note, I edited my voice pitch a little higher so you could tell the difference between young Ronald, as I'm referring to my past self, and present Ronald, who will be interjecting in the note with both critiques and redirects, as it were. I'm also adding a bit of idealistic music underneath young Ronald so we can really set the tone. Now, to provide some context here, young Ronald wrote this note on November 17th, 2006, while he was still a student at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia. Go Rams. It was a Friday morning, the weekend before people would begin to travel for Thanksgiving. Now, that's basically all I could say definitively besides what's in the note, because after checking my journal and seeing if I could find a corresponding entry to give more insight into what I was thinking to make me write this, I found nothing. So with that limited bit of context, let's hear what young Ronald had to say.
I've been thinking about goodbyes. Let us examine them for a second. Merriam-Webster says, a concluding remark or gesture at parting, often used interjectionally. A taking of leave.
So let me just stop right there and say present Ronald still begins most forms of any public speeches, sermons, or talks with either a quote or a definition. However, can we just reflect for a moment on the fact that I felt the need in a blog post to define what goodbye meant in strict terms? The worst part about this is I don't really reference the definition the rest of this post. I basically hit you with a dictionary definition and you're like, thanks for that tidbit, Ronald. I had no idea what goodbye meant. Young Ronald would have been better off starting with a quote. But anyway, young Ronald continues.
I was sitting here watching Laguna Beach and I came to the conclusion that all goodbyes are final because in essence, you're saying goodbye to the person you know presently.
Okay, Present Ronald here again. So I figured out what I was doing on that Friday morning. I was watching Laguna Beach. I feel compelled to point out how much I hate what I was doing by telling the reader that here. It's my feeble attempt to relate to the reader by giving them something surprising about me. Like, yes, I too watched Laguna Beach. Look at me and my wide, varied interests. Like casually mentioning that I'm Team LC and can't stand the way Heidi changed after she started dating Spencer is enough for me to win you over with my opinion. It shouldn't matter that my thoughts on LC giving up the trip of a lifetime to stay in LA with Jason, or that I hated Audrina wasting much of her time on the show chasing after what amounted to a homeless person. Young Ronald, that has nothing to do with the point that you're trying to make. Present Ronald would never do that.
Think about your last real goodbye, and not just bye-bye or see you or bye. I mean a real goodbye. Like a, hey, you're going to college and I'm finishing up high school goodbye. When you reunite with that person, it's rather awkward most times. It's because you almost have to reintroduce yourself to this person that you bade farewell. I mean, at the parting of your ways, you gave a concluding remark, meaning that you pretty much put a period at the end of your sentence.
Here I tried, and I mean really tried, to convey the emotional magnitude of a farewell by not really explaining what I meant when I went through the different sounding goodbyes. Then I went further to use an example that did not age well with time. I mean, how many of us really think about saying goodbye to our high school girlfriends when we're headed off to college as adults? Now, in young Ronald's defense, I believe that was the most significant version of a goodbye he had known to date. However, I digress. Continue, young Ronald.
I'm reflecting and thinking about the things I said goodbye to lately. High school, old girlfriends, bad habits, my laptop, money, old friend, etc.
Let me just quickly point out two things here. Clearly at the time, young Ronald had no idea how to list things he said goodbye to in order of merit. Otherwise, he wouldn't have included his laptop in the same category as bad habits, old girlfriends, and old friend. Also, saying goodbye to money here just seems ambiguous at best and possibly psychotic at worst. How are you saying goodbye to money, my guy? By spending it? Losing it? Like what? What are you talking about? And then he drops this gem of a line.
Like the stress of reacquainting with any of those things or people is almost too much to bear. Sometimes I've even ended things on bad terms so I don't have to worry about saying goodbye.
Number one, that I got away with referencing getting reacquainted with my laptop as being stress that would be too much to bear is astounding. Number two, I have never purposefully ended a relationship on bad terms to avoid a goodbye. I'm almost positive I read or watched that in some angsty teen-focused drama series of some sort. I was being emotionally dishonest here because any relationships I've had that have ended on bad terms did so naturally. Thank you very much, young Ronald. Also, please don't begin your sentences with like. All right, but here's where young Ronald begins to make a little bit of sense.
I think what we intend to do is pause our relationships with one another and pick up where we left off, but we conclude them by saying goodbye with our mouths and our attitudes, and psychologically we file them away as past experiences. When I think about it like this, all I can think is that when I meet up with past experiences, I have a tendency to treat them the way that I know, and the way that I know is the last memory I have of them. In essence, we don't allow people to change. The school nerd will always be the school nerd no matter what, or the jock, or the slut, or the class president, or whatever they are.
Let me apologize for using the S word here, but I meant in terms of how we judge people in general. It can be hard to break out of the role to which you've been assigned, even if it's been done unfairly. I've had relationships with people in which, after not seeing or interacting with each other for a long time, we meet again and immediately pick up where we left off. I used to think this was because we were people that had not changed. Present Ronald now believes that sometimes the best possible outcome of people changing is that they can both change in ways that further complement their relationship with each other. They now have had experience that allowed them to relate even better than they once did.
I I think that saying goodbye should not only be a concluding remark, but also a way of opening something within us that allows us to see the change in people and treat them according to the person they are and not the person they once were. So the next time you meet up with someone you haven't seen in a while, meet them first, then make a judgment based on the person they are and not the person you knew. People change. I just haven't figured out if that's good or bad.
When you say goodbye to someone, what they experience when they are separate from you could possibly change them, their perspective, and their relationship with you. What we can hope for is that the change allows both of you to remain in sync despite being different people, but things don't always work out that way. In a lot of ways, social media has suspended the concept of saying goodbye to a person naturally. Once upon a time, we used to be able to part ways with someone and never see them again unless by chance. With social media, saying goodbye doesn't always mean they're gone. We could see them live out their life, grow, and change remotely. A lot of the change we see in ourselves comes as a result of our experiences. So in being separated from someone, you miss the experiences that may have impacted their personality and caused the person you once knew to become a new person to learn. Sometimes this happens right in front of our eyes, and our proximity prevents us from seeing that the person we thought we knew and loved is now someone else entirely, with only shadows of what we once found familiar remaining. That doesn't mean you can't get reacquainted. Some of the best times we have are spent on memory lane. However, it's important to embrace the changes in other people as much as we embrace them in ourselves. So as we continue to grow and change, say goodbye to the people you knew and say hello to the people you know. That's something both present and young Ronald can agree on. Now, before I go, I would encourage all of you to go back through your social media posts and blogs, or maybe even pick up your old yearbook or your diary and try to wrap your head around the you that you used to be. I can't promise you'll like everything you find, but I can tell you that your search will be time well spent. Time Well Spent is a production of OhitsBigRon Studios. Theme and additional music provided by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. Outro music provided by Michael Corte. Do you want to reach out and connect about the show? Have some feedback? You can find me on all the social media things, including Snapchat, Twitter, and Instagram, at OhitsBigRon. That's OhitsBigRon. Time Well Spent will return next month. Thanks for listening. Come on, Ronald. I can't face these streets without you.
Spamela?
Hello.
Ha! I'm recording right now, so now you're being recorded.
How delightful.
Yes.
I didn't mean to ruin your recording, though.
No, I finished
Terrible.
it before I answered the phone.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah, I'm in the booth. Fire in the booth. Fire in the booth. Fire in the booth.
What? Fire in the booth, man?
Fire in the booth. Brrr, skitty pop.
Fire?
Yeah, blop, blop, blop.
In what booth?
I'm in my closet. It's not a booth.
Oh, I see. Is that where you send all your guests to speak?
No, this is where I do all my voiceovers.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, no, this is where I do
Your
them.
friends, do they also have to go in the closet?